Welcome, Alex, to Metallarium Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about Pandemia, this new album, Dark in its Devotions, and more things related to the modern war in general. So we are starting by asking, how are you doing today? How did the band do in the last couple of years? Because your previous album was released 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a while. It's
Yep.
been a while. Everything is good, good today. Yeah, what made me feel good today is this. I just got a physical copies of the album today from Hammerhead
Amazing.
Records. I'm like, unbelievable. Just today, I just go in the morning, just unpacked and everything. Uh, yeah, things are good. Things are good. We are really solid lineup now. I came back to the band like 5 years ago. We started creating new music in 2022. So everything is rolling. We got an incredible record deal, for the new album. The album turned out really well as well. Yeah, we can talk further about that. So yeah, it took a little bit longer to put it together. Like you say, it's been 10 years, since the last release. Plus the lineup has changed a little bit. So there's definitely when you listen to it, you can notice some differences, in the sound to the approach to the in the approach to the compositions, and yeah, just the way things are structured. That's slightly different. It's still Pandemia, It's kind of got back the original spirit, when we were building the band up, in the 90s. So it's got a little bit of that, a little bit of maturity, and a bunch of other things. But yeah, I think yeah, it feels good right now. Everything feels pretty settled, around the album. And we are on the right track.
Okay,
Um,
okay. Okay, amazing, amazing. So, and for this one, well, I think the next question will be a common one because that is. Well, I hear the band since the beginning to now, so but now these 10 years since your previous album, At the Gates of Nihilism, and now we have this Dark in the Devotion. So why the band delayed 10 years to release a new album? Because it's a huge time, no 3 or 4 or 5.
yeah, yeah, that's a very good question. I'm like, I I feel a bit like an imposter here because I left the band in 2005, right? And I didn't return until like 2020. So I can't really tell you, what happened in between. I really took a break. I was not even listening to whatever they put out, and I was quite removed from it. But I think there was a little bit of a like a hiatus, of the band. The band kind of released the album number five, and then they just decided to take a little break, and it just ended up being like 5 year break. So that was like between 2017 and 2022. So that was a big reason why, and then when we got back together, we had to put a lineup together, get kind of gel, as a band again. And that started kind of in 2022. And yeah, and once we felt like we were ready, I got the green light, from the other guys to start working on music, and I just put together all the best ideas I had in my archives, and the new stuff as well, and started working on the album, and it took a while, to get the songs together, like 1 2 years, then to get the contributions from the others, and all that stuff. It was a journey. So yeah, I think multiple factors, mainly the band was on a hiatus, for whatever reasons, I think it just needed to kind of recharge, and take care of other stuff. And now, and then it took a while to compose everything and make sure it's up to the kind of Pandemia standard. We could have just thrown together a bunch of songs and then release it, but that's not how we work. So we decided to just take our time, find the right, find the right studio, find the right producer, find the right mixing guy, and who did the mixing, and then find a record label. Yeah, it just took a while. Actually, the album was ready like last year in August. That was just mastered, delivered. And then we were kind of looking for a record label and everything. And this is the results today. It just came back. And this is the LP. It's fucking beautiful.
Great.
I just can't. I just can't stop looking at it, like the logo is in gold, and it's just, yeah, wonderful. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. There was multiple reasons why I took it's not like the band was stuck and could not create. It was just yeah, there was other kind of factors, that played into the fact that we didn't release anything for 10 years. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. That is true. That is true because yes, you released these albums 10 years ago. So now,
Yeah.
well, talking about now, and so for this one, you mentioned me that you decide to wait until you have all the process composed, or all the things works to release this new
Hmm.
album or to compose this now. So for this one, when do you decide to write songs for this new Darkened Devotion? When it was the right time at that moment? Because the band it was in hiatus, then you returned the band and more things. So when it was the right moment to create the songs for this new album, and perhaps do you rescue any composition that led were out for your previous record for Personal Demon or Riven, sorry.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's yeah, we I think it was like 2022. We had this COVID stuff, happening, of course, you couldn't really rehearse, and we are also things have changed, since I wasn't in the band and stuff. I also don't live in the hometown where I used when we used to, we used to come from one place. Now we all live in different places. So it took a while to kind of get our shit together and then organize ourselves, and I think it was 2022. We actually did two singles then. They are also featured on the new album, which in a kind of more up-to-date version. Yeah, 2022, we were like, okay, now we've played a bunch of gigs, we know each other a little bit. Let's put together an album, and that's when the process started. So, and also like the one of the main kind of aspects, of reforming the band was finding the right drummer, because the previous drummer had left with the hiatus, and took us like 2 years to find the right guy, between 2020 and 2022. And we have just this incredible, talented young guy called Jakub Bayer, and he is, yeah, he loves death metal, he loves the music we play, and he just puts everything into it, and he's super skilled. He's a schooled drummer, he comes from, he studied music, he can read music, and he plays in an orchestra as well, and whatever, so it's just, so to get him on board, and stuff, also the logistics, because he's pretty busy, that also kind of played into it a little bit. Yeah, but all in all, 2022 gates open and we are working on the album, fully. So
Hmm? Okay, okay,
cool.
okay, okay. Okay, I understand. I understand about this one. So now,
Nice.
well, right now, you said it one thing that there's two new members in the band because the vocals is from 2008, and well, the drummer is the last one from 2022.
Hmm.
A great drummer, but into this album also. So how is the entry of these two members to the sound of Pandemia? Because this new album remembers me the Personal Demon or Riven area, not the Fit for Anger or the Gates of Nihility. That's a
Yeah.
great album, but I prefer the first two, the second and third album for the band. It's a different thing. So how it was the process of composition with the new drummer, and I think for me especially the technology helps a lot you to bring back this old brutal
Hmm.
and this brutal way that you did in your Perpetual Demon. I remember that Personal Demon.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's amazing that you kind of mentioned this.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like the re-establishing the band, it involved me, kind of meeting the singer because I haven't really worked with him before, he wasn't there when I left the band, so that was one of the factors. He's not a new guy at all, he's been there in the band longer than me actually, it's like almost I don't know what is it now, like 16, 17 years as a singer of Pandemia. So it was more like me getting used to working with him, finding the common kind of path. And then, yeah, with the drummer, starting from scratch. And in terms of like the musical direction, it's probably coming from myself, because I composed all of the music. I just sat down and I took all the riffs, I had in the archive. I created new ones. And I set really high standard, for myself, and I made sure that it's the Pandemia sound, like yeah, we could talk more technical about the way the guitar, it's a little bit different than the other guys were playing, when I was in the band. I'm using a lot of weird chords, that you wouldn't probably normally hear in a death metal band, and that adds a little bit of colors and everywhere, a little bit more kind of insanity, and a little bit of spirit in it. I always kind of compose at night, I always make sure it's an idea that doesn't come from my head, that it's something I catch from somewhere, and then I use my head and my experience to process it, and then kind of put it into some sort of listenable form, put kind of this pandemia spirit on top of it. The technology helped in a way because, yeah, I've got Logic on my laptop, I've got loads of cool plugins, I could use some advanced drum loops, from Tune Track, so I could give the drummer a really clear idea, of what the song is gonna be like, and then he would just kind of make it sound even more like drummer would play it, right? Because when a guitarist composes drums, you can smell it, it's just so I was that really helped, I would just pretty much put a whole song together, and I would really just keep it in my consciousness, work on it, work on it, work on it, just leave it for a week, come back to it. Does it still feel good? And stuff like that. And eventually I would just present it to the guys, when it was ready. And then we would start working on the improving the drum parts and putting the lyrics and vocal lines together, you know. But technology was like, yeah, definitely a helpful part, because the fact that we don't live in the same region, it's like 2-3 hours distance between us. And we are all pretty busy with our lives and with uh, all the commitments we have, like having the technology and being able to send demos and ideas across, was super helpful. That was super, like, I could record the guitars, I could record the scratch guitars at home, then we would go into the studio where we were recording drums, and we would just play the scratch guitars, and then everything was kind of much smoother. So I love it. I like both. I would love to just stand in a rehearsal room and let the kind of creativity flow. But it wasn't on the cards. For this one. So this was this was a great approach as well, and it worked out. I love the album. You know. So it turned out really well. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, yeah. This new album is a great one. Congratulations! I really love it.
Cheers.
Amazing one. So and
That's all.
even
Yeah.
when I hear the first the last 2 feet of anger and at gates of nihilism, from it returned to the old era for the personal demon of Riven. That's the
Mm,
sound. Like, do you skip it that 2 albums and then bring back that old sound that I loved at first? And
mm.
also and also one thing. So now talking about now the promotion a little more about this new Darkened Devotion. What kind of plans do you have for this new album? Well, you will prepare more videos, perhaps you work in a new album. Who knows? What kind of plans do you have for Darkened Devotion, and obviously for the pandemia in general?
Yeah, yeah, we are very lucky with the fact that we've got an incredible record label now. We've got
Mhm.
Hammer Hard Records, we've got a 3 album deal with them. They fell in love with the album, they just listened to it, and they kept kind of coming back to us, and they were like, hey, let's see, if you can figure out a deal. And they really offered us a good deal, so that was incredible. So that really helps, it helps with the distribution. Everything goes through Napalm Records as well, in Americas and in Europe. So we got incredible distribution. I just Google now the album, and it's everywhere. It's just like we never had this. It's just beautiful. So that's one part, is just kind of make sure the album doesn't disappear, because there's so much going on. There's so much being released, and I just give it a fair chance, to kind of get it to those death metal guys out there. and gals, of course, just to death metal people out there who might get some kind of how I would say it, this album was created with the idea of delivering some kind of positive, great kick, and just give you a good feeling. And I really would love, if it got to as many people and just make them feel good, and just people who get death metal. I guess once you understand Morbid Angel, then you know what I mean. Like, yeah, it's just that feeling, and that's what I'm trying to hook onto this kind of affinity for death metal. And this album has got piles and piles of that baked into it. So it's just get it to as many people. The plans are just to work as closely as we can with the record label. I mean, our PR agency, to the interviews, to do promotions. See, push it out there as much as can. We are looking at touring as well. We have a booking agent for Europe now. We are looking at other regions as well. So if anyone's interested, if you guys liked seeing us back in the day, we would definitely consider coming back, to your region, to play in Peru or, in the surrounding countries. Uh, so we are looking at touring. There's some ideas, nothing solidified yet. We are gonna celebrate 30 years of Pandemia in the autumn. We're gonna do a very, very special show in our hometown. Uh, we have incredibly special guest. I don't know if you know the Swiss band called Messiah. They
Yep.
were one of the first, to me, they are like, you've got Celtic Frost, and this is Messiah for me. I grew
Mm.
up on them, and that's like the original death metal, like almost like on the level of death, to me. We were listening to them as teenagers. We were totally kind of mesmerized by their music, and they agreed to do one-off show with us, and come to Czech Republic, play with us, and celebrate the 30 years of Pandemia. So super excited about that. A lot of energy will go into that, which will also help promoting the album. We are looking at some touring. Now we are at Hammerheart. We actually have access to a bunch of really cool bands on the same roster. We have Impurity, Concra, Master, and we are looking at putting some touring together with them. When the kind of schedules work out. So that's it in general. It's a really weird time to be promoting a death metal album now. With all the streaming platforms, all the everything has been digitalized. It's not like back in the day you would just go out, play, meet people, socialize. Now it's more like pushing it to playlists and trying to find some influencers or people who kind of hook into the music and who would promote us. And so we have to kind of acknowledge that and do some, like, all this social media stuff. You have to do some reels and posts and blah blah blah. All that kind of all that kind of promotional activity, yeah, is definitely planned for us. And yeah, I guess that's as far as the plans go. We are just now, like, the next milestone. The first one was getting the physical albums in here. That's great. That's happened today. Next Friday, the album is coming out, 16th of May. So then, that will be the next part, and we will see what happens around it, what the buzz is, where the energy can go to promote it as much as possible. But we really want to get it out there and make sure that people who might get something out of it, they can hear the album and really enjoy it.
Mm. Okay, okay, okay. That is true. And well, okay. The next question went to that area for the Hammerhead Records because you started with a small label, then you go to the War Anthem Records, a small label, then Mighty Music, yeah, more like a medium label, and now you
Mm,
are one of well-known label that is Hammerhead Records. So
mm,
you are okay. You provide me all the information that with Fifth of Anger and the Name of Nihilism, you weren't on Pandemia at that moment.
mm.
So you are for the first song. Now, how it was your perspective or to enter now to this bigger label, Hammerhead Records? How many things changed since you released your second or third album with the small labels and you are with Hammerhead Records, well-known label?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the label came a little bit later later in the game, First, we first made the record, we first recorded everything. We paid for all the recording process, mastering, mixing, we found the best studio we could get, and with that, with a complete package, I already had the album artwork ready, everything was ready. So we were kind of once that happened, we started shopping for record labels, and then yeah, I mean, Hammerheart was actually the first label we contacted, We did like a chain mail, just emailing everyone possible. But Hammerheart were the first ones, and they
Mhm.
started immediately talking and getting interest. So that actually happened fairly recently. That was in we signed a contract in October last year. So when I came into the band, there was a little bit of a radio silence. We still had a optional contract with Mighty Music for a new album, but like the communication wasn't great, and the contract was a little bit not so favorable to the band, So we were quite how to say it, we were not so sad, to leave the record label, switch over to Hammerheart. What the benefits of Hammerheart is just they're pure metalheads. They love the album, they love the album. They're real into metal. They just love having the physical items out there as well. They are on top of their game, super hardworking. It's just ridiculous. I don't know when those guys sleep. They have a very good system in place. So the distribution is great. They have they really get the social media stuff, which is important these days. All the streaming, everything is covered. And yeah, we will see. I mean, the album gets released next week, so the actual first wave of impact, will be very visible in the coming months. Also, one of the benefits, like I mean, like since we joined the record label, everything got much more professional. We kind of start talking in almost like a different language. Now we are communicating with them, and within the band, we have a PR agency, that's taking care of contacting people like you, and magazines and doing interviews, and it's definitely a step up, and we actually wanted to be with Hammerhard already, like back in, I don't know, 2000, We were looking at them and it's like that would be cool. But we were touring with Rebellion, the Brazilian death
Oh
metal
yeah.
band. If
Mhm.
you remember, we did a big tour with Radio and Vital Remains, and Rebellion were there too. And they were already on Hammerheart back then. And we were
Mhm.
like, oh, guys, you get so much support from the label, this is incredible. And now, just like 25 years later, we made it happen for ourselves, super grateful. And yeah, I hope this kind of relationship just lasts. And yeah, we do something great for the label and for ourselves, for promoting the band and with this yeah, with this cooperation. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, okay, okay. Amazing, amazing about all this information. Now, well, talking about now a little more talking about yeah relating for the other kind of things from Pandemia, because I remember that you played
Mhm.
here in Latin America many years ago, well, like more than 20
Yeah.
years, please. So, how was your experience at that moment to play that albums at that moment and the crown in other cities in Peru and Colombia and Chile because you play in a lot of countries at that moment, like Fleshless
Yeah.
did at what time. So do you remember? Do you have any kind of an anecdote or perhaps any kind of or something? So no, any kind of anecdote that you remember from from that for that tour?
Yeah. No, it was huge for us. We did two tours, one in 2003 and one in 2005. Did you
Mhm.
come to one of the concerts? Did we
No,
did
no.
No, unfortunately, yeah. He played, the great thing is that we managed to play like smaller places, that was our idea. We were really like we always had this kind of passion for death metal, and for the purity of it, and just putting out a great death metal show and everything. And the reason we went to Latin America was really like, like almost like death metal missionaries, We wanted
Mhm.
to spread the music, there's many people, and especially places that um don't get too many concerts. Like you mentioned, Fleshless, they opened the gates. They did an incredible job. I think they went there in 2002 or something.
Yep.
Colombia, Ecuador.
Mhm.
and then in Peru, I can't remember. Yeah, they went to Peru as well.
Mhm.
And then yeah, we went we went in like 1 year later, and we just went. We went nuts, We spent 2.5 months on tour, in Latin America. So we went all the way from Brazil all the way to Mexico, and everything in between. I don't know any anecdotes. I just loved playing the smaller places, like we played it in Juliaca, it was just a bunch of kind of like Incas, showing up, just guys, like from the Aborigines, almost like with, metal kind of denim vest, and patches, it was just beautiful, and it, yeah, we had a lot of kind of really real good connections, with the crowd there, a lot of post-concert parties, a lot of kind of pictures taken and just discussions. We did our first press conference, I think it was in Peru actually. Is it Peru or Chile? I can't remember. Or press, it was just like came for the concert, and the promoter was like, "Oh no, just come with us first." And he just sat us in his room, and I was just in front of a microphone, like, like a proper press conference, like the politicians do. It's like, holy shit, we never had that experience before, yeah.
Okay.
So all this, it was such a virgin experience for us, touring at such scale, and it was quite uh it was very honest, and very kind of pure experience. We traveled on kind of intercity buses. We didn't have a tour bus or something, so we really got to know every country. Just like watching it from the window, and yeah, you get to know to the air conditioning in Latin America. It's like, what the fuck? You enter the bus and it was like -10. It's like, what's going on here? So right, I mean, like the guys, when I was not in the band anymore, they released like a post-mortem DVD, like they call it like Pandemic Mission to Latin America. So if I think we still have some copies or somewhere, we gonna upload it to our YouTube channel eventually. So check it out, to have a taste of how it was back then. I can imagine the scene has changed, by now. It's not such an such a unique experience to have bands from the Western country, or from outside Latin America coming over. But we were one of the like first who did a proper tour, In some of the little cities, we were the first ones ever to like an international metal band to play, which was an incredible honor, Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Well, I wouldn't there in any concert here in any kind of Latin America, but I went to places. I remember
Mm.
that places open in these old gig tours from your country because you're from them you arrive and 1 year later or 2 years later that they arrive because they arrived in 2022. I will remember places arrived here in 2022. Great band at that moment, by the way. So.
Yeah.
Another question I want to ask you. Well, for me, the Czech Republic or Czechia, Czechia. So I all the time when I hear bands from there, all the times very related with the grindcore, with the gore grind, with the brutal death, with the technical death. I don't know. A lot of metal happened, but all the time, Just Masters Hammers is a black metal band. But then the rest of the bands, Godless Truth. Oh, Pandemia, Fleshless. Well, there's a lot of bands in growing. I have I have here in my collection more than 20 or 30 records from 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 your country, and all for me it's a curious thing because all the time when I didn't know that from Republic Czech or Czech Republic, I didn't know that all you lean down to death metal stuff, to the brutal death metal stuff, to technical death metal, or to gore grind death metal. That is a curious thing for me. So why always your country are very lean down to the death metal and not to the heavy or thrash or
Mm.
black or other styles? Mostly all bands plays their death metal. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I've also noticed this trend, even like from the start of the band, we always noticed like we were always like one of the very few
Mhm.
death metal bands, there was always some, and when we played concerts, most of the bands around us were like grindcore, death grind, brutal death, and we were one of the very few who focused just on the metal part, and more like added the death metal on top of it, And I really don't know why. We have this festival, Obscene Extreme, which is
Mhm.
very, very late. It's like a mecca, for this kind of music. So that definitely helps, the scene to kind of flourish. Because a lot of bands get their exposure, and a lot of Czech bands play there as well. Uh, yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. I really don't know. We are quite in stylistically and what we listen to, we are quite separated
Mhm.
from this. We don't really listen too much to like a brutal death metal or anything to do much with grindcore. We are really more like yeah, focusing on like the purity of metal. We don't go into this more like the social aspect, or the gore and whatever, horror, that's never been a theme for us. So we don't even like listen to it in our spare time. So it's a hard to kind of distinguish wise, But it's strange. We probably have the same uh, kind of understanding here. I really don't know, man. But it's fact. It's a fact, and I'm really glad you picked up on it because Czech Republic is very good with that. And I think some of the bands that come from the genre, like the brutal
Mhm.
death and death grind and grindcore, they really are at the top level, like yeah, they can match, whatever is happening in the rest of the world easily, with their skills, sound, and composition. They are really good at that. Yeah, it's just not really that close to our hearts, in our band. We would never consider ourselves as brutal death metal or something. It's just from a different group. Yeah, but it's a good point. Yeah, that's definitely very alive in Czech, and yeah, there
Yeah.
isn't that many like other. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And one of the last questions for this interview, Alex, it is, well, and you started the band in 1995, and your first album was released in 1999, the Spreading the Message. But then you decide to release more records in 2000. So for me, it's a curious thing all the
Mm,
time that a band from Europe delayed like 4 or 5 years to release a new album, because here is very different. In Latin America, where you have a band in the 80s or 90s, now the bands delayed
mm,
10 years, 20 years, and I know bands that it was born in the 80s and releasing albums last year. So it was very different for the economy and a lot of things. So now, why you decide
mm.
to release your album in 1999, and not when you decide to create the band 95, 96, 97.
Yeah. Yeah, it took a while for us to be ready, because yeah, we did a bunch of demos, we did a lot of touring. I think by the time we did the first album, we already played like 150, 200 gigs, already. We had under our wings, so we were a little bit more experienced. But yeah, it took a while, and we are not like extremely creative, that like you would have, and we are very selective also of the material, so it took a while. And also, if you kind of follow the journey, we also have our demos now, on the
Mhm.
streaming platform, so you can check out what we sounded like before the album, and our style has changed a lot, like we really like the as we progressed, like 96, 97, we started playing a little bit faster, more intense, suddenly blast beats would start appearing. And it took a while to kind of solidify the new style, to move away from like when we were beginning the band and we were more influenced by like old Amorphis or old Death, and then we were like more stepping into the era of Vader, Morbid Angel, or and such bands. So yeah, I think it took a while for the first album to come out. It's yeah, it's come out pretty well. I think it's kind of testimonial to the time where we were at. And but then you can definitely hear the difference between the first and second. Everything got tighter, the compositions are much more refined,
Yeah.
there's no mistakes really, on the album. The first one is still a bit like a learning experience, and it's got great songs. It's just I wish the execution was a little bit better, you know. But it's kind of timestamp, you know. It's where we were, and that's what we did, and we just have to leave it. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Well, Alex,
Cool.
we arrived to the sad moment to this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one like me. Well, you bring back
Lovely.
old memories from the gigs from Fleshless and Pandemia here in my country and
Yeah.
also in all part of Latin America. That's a great thing. So, and perhaps congratulations on this new record because this is a tremendous records. I hear all the night to do this interview. Amazing record. So remember
Thank you.
the second and third album from the band when you were in at that moment. And perhaps do you want to add
Mm.
something to your Latin American fans and obviously Metalero followers?
Yeah, of course. You know, guys, just please keep real metal alive. You know, don't let it get swallowed up by trends or other genres or technology. You know, just keep the purity of of the amazing feeling of listening and promoting real metal. You know, keep it alive. And please, yeah, just get in touch. Check the album out. You know, it's definitely gonna take you on a ride. And I hope to see you one day again, you know. Hope we can make it over, you know, and then have a good real connection again and just play some real death metal together.